Welcome back, basketball fans, to another great show with Sean on basketball. We're going to be talking about Kentucky. Obviously, I've been really excited about this new era, this new transition. Obviously, last year, Coach Calipari's Kentucky team kind of disappointed, and based on that, a lot of people started to push back against Coach Cal, and he ended up taking this opportunity to move to Arkansas, which I've been following a lot to start the season as well. And obviously, we got ex NCAA champion Mark Pope to take over the program. And people were very excited to see potentially what was going to happen, who the roster was going to be, and how this was going to unfold. We've already had a few games this season. We just beat Duke in what was a fucking great game. Great game. I mean, I was so happy to come home and find out after work that that was on and I get to watch that game. And it really did not disappoint at all. Before we even get into talking about this, I always knew after watching like the preseason and everything else what Kentucky was. And Arkansas is typical of what Cal is. Super athletic, very highly rated high school players. But it's clear to see the difference between the two of them. One, you have a very smart, experienced shooting team. The other one, you have a very young, long, athletic team, right? And at this point of the year, it wasn't much of a stretch to feel that the more experienced team and the better shooters were going to be able to pull it off. Whereas potentially the more young, athletic team, obviously, we could expect things from them. And that's what you expect from Arkansas this year. And obviously, that's what Duke is doing as well, right? And it was great to see Kentucky be able to overcome a team like Duke with the great youth and athleticism and length they have. My biggest problem with Kentucky moving forward is the SEC, where they're going to be running into a lot more athletic, long front courts, which I think potentially could really cause a lot of trouble for Kentucky. But this is Coach Pope's first year, and obviously we know that next year you're going to get a lot of highly rated high school players to join the program. Already, when you look at ESPN's rankings right now, excuse me, at this point, there's big talk about number 5 ranked high school player Caleb Wilson from Georgia, power forward, 6'9", small forward, power forward, signing with Kentucky. That's not official yet, but you can go all over social media and see there's a real big push for that. You also then, of course, have number 13th ranked point guard or shooting guard Jasper Johnson, who's already committed to Kentucky, which is a great, obviously, addition to the team. And then, of course, after that, you scroll down a little more, and we get to Acadian Lewis, the 6'2" point guard from Washington, D.C., who's committed to the squad as well. And then you keep scrolling down, and you get to Malachi Moreno, the 6'10" center from Georgetown, Kentucky. So right there already, you're getting a real good recruiting class to come into next season for this Kentucky team. You still, of course, have the young players we already brought to the team this year, and then, adding youth, athleticism, and some of the things maybe Kentucky doesn't have this year. But I've been super impressed. You can see the experience is very, very beneficial. The reason really why Kentucky beat Duke this week was because of the experience. The fact that these older players, with the experience they have, were able to really grind it out, get physical, and do what they had to do to pull this victory from the jaws of defeat. After the first half, it really looked as if, Duke was going to run away with it. But the experience, the tenaciousness, and just that tough, rugged Kentucky game they brought to it to really become physical, beat them up a little, take the physicality to the younger players. And obviously this is going to be very important for this year's SEC, where we know the SEC, there's some dogs out there, and the teams just play hard, right? And that's why it's so super competitive, regardless of who you play in. Alabama, Florida, Auburn, LSU, Tennessee, shit. You don't have an off night, in the SEC. So it's going to be super interesting to see what Kentucky does this year, and I'm excited. So let's chop this up and talk about this new squad with Mark Pope, the new coach of Kentucky, and obviously with his legacy as a Kentucky graduate and a champion, who's done very well as a coach for previous squads as well. You got to like the manner he brings to the team. Calm, not overly excited, not an angry coach, but a guy that really kind of tries to relate to his players and get them to understand on this kind of level, as opposed to being in their face and trying to use emotion to really get to them. Obviously, a lot of the players that we brought in this year were a lot of players I was unfamiliar with, and a lot of players who obviously I've become acquainted with over the last month and a half, 2 months. And a few players obviously I had heard about before, but they'd obviously went to different teams and I wasn't that familiar with them. So it's really going to be interesting to see how this team gels together and forms. And I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking very forward to it. So, obviously losing Coach Cal, for me, I felt happy to see him go, not to be a hater. I mean, I don't have any negativity towards Coach Cal. I've been watching the Arkansas games and cheering for them. I love the point guard, Boogie Fland. I think he is great, super great. But the problem with that team, obviously they're young, but it's also the offense. I felt that Coach Cal's offense was too stale, too predictable. If you can't defensively stop teams and get turnovers, then in the half-court offense, I felt that they were just limited, and especially you lose a few big shooters from last year's team, you come into this year's team, and if you look at Arkansas, you know exactly what I mean. That team is not going to do as well as Kentucky because they just don't have the shooters to spread the floor and open up the lanes for the other players on the team who may be longer and athletic. But, if you just close in the zone or just close in on the paint, I don't think Kentucky's going to be able to have an easy time scoring points this year. We will see. But let me know what you think in the comment section below. So here's a few of the players. We'll just go through these players one by one, chop up what I've seen. I was going to make this video obviously before the season started, but I felt it would be better if I actually got to see these players play and had a better sense of really who they were. I know going into this year, Lamont Butler was an experienced point guard, really, really praised for being a great defender. And really, that's one of the strengths of this current Kentucky team, the experience on the defensive end, right? Last year's team, the problem they had was, defensively getting on the ball early and making point guards struggle with their passing and running their offense. Whereas with guys like Lamont Butler, who's a great pressure defender, great hands, very physically strong and mature. Offensively, he's not a bad player. He can hit the open jump shot. He can get into the lane because of his physicality. He's not the best finisher or the most dynamic player, but nonetheless, what really you want him for is the stability and the defensive pressure that he brings to the team. And so far, what I've seen has been super impressive. No point guard in the NCAA is going to have an easy time running into Lamont Butler game after game. Then, of course, we get Brandon Garrison, who kind of falls into what we were talking about previously. One of these highly ranked high school players, very athletic, and a guy with a lot of upside, right? You can see that when you watch him play. Very long, offensively, he's a good player, got a very good jump shot, can step out to three-point range. Defensively, he's long, so he can block a lot of shots. Still needs a little more seasoning and being a little tougher on the inside paint, and he will need that moving into the SEC tournament this year because he's going to be running into a lot of guys who are like him, long and athletic, but dudes that are super tenacious, super physical, and so he's going to really have to bear down if he wants to be as effective as he could. Then, of course, you got Andrew Carr, who played great against Duke. Obviously, he couldn't stop Cooper Flagg, but nonetheless, he was very, very important for the offense for this team, right? He may not be the best defensive player. He's not the most athletic player, but he's a smart, intuitive player who knows how to move the ball. Offensively, he's versatile. He can score in the paint. He can step out, hit the three. He passes well. He moves the ball well. And he really sort of is one of those dependable players you can have on the floor in crunch moments. And he's going to make the proper decision. Defensively, he may not be the most explosive athlete or the longest guy out there, but at least he understands the schemes the team is running and understands how to play team defense. And that's going to be important, as we move further into the season. Then you get Amari Williams, the inside defensive stopper, obviously a big rebounder, physically a real specimen, offensively a little limited, but they like to run the offense through him at the top of the key because he's confident passing the ball, confident dribbling the ball. And generally, when his offense works, it's when he's, driving to the hole and getting his offense off. Defensively, he's been very good. Physically, he's a monster on the inside. You get Garrison behind him, and then Andrew Carr. And really right there, that's your big men. And that's the problem. This Kentucky doesn't have much depth in that position. It's unfortunate none of the players from last year's team chose to stick around to become part of this squad. I would have loved to see Theo stick around. He would have been fucking a godsend to this team with his tenaciousness, his offensiveness, and just the versatility he would have brought into the team. But hey, it is what it is. Then we get to two of the more experienced guards on the squad, Kobe Brea and Kerr Kriisa. Both great shooters. Great shooters. Neither of them are starters on this current squad. That may change moving forward. But coming off the bench, you bring two players like them with a lot of experience and really out of the gym shooters. These guys literally can hit three-point shots once they cross the half-point line. They are true gunslingers. And Kriisa, obviously, Kerr, confident, a little arrogant. You like to see that arrogance on the team. Obviously, they're experienced, and you want guys that are confident. Kobe Brea, a solid player. Not the best guy driving, not the best defender, kind of like Kerr, obviously still not the best defender, but coming off the bench as your sixth and seventh man, you couldn't ask for much more. As long as they understand the schemes, play tough and tenacious, have a bit of physicality and grit to them, they will be perfect defensive players for the squad. But what you're really pulling out of them is the offensive versatility and the fact that so far, out of everybody we talked about, outside of Amari, everybody can shoot the three on this team. So far, everyone I talked about. So the shooting is really a strength of this year's Kentucky team. I mean, literally, it doesn't matter how deep you go on the bench. Consistently, they go 10 deep. Then you have the two Kentucky high school players on the team for 11 and 12. Obviously, they get used as well, but so far they've not been consistently used. So generally, you've been using 10 players consistently on this team, and 9 of the players can shoot. And then the 2 players off the bench can also shoot. So out of 12 players on this roster, 11 of them are knockdown three-point shooters. And you can see that that's what Pope really pushes. Pope obviously was a big man, but he was more like, what's his face? Not the best defender, not the most athletic player, but smart, consistent, cerebral, and obviously a guy who could score on the inside and outside. Then we get to Ote Awea, who's starting at at shooting guard. He's been brilliant. Again, great defensive tenacity, really in front, on top of guys. With him and obviously what's his face as your point guard, that's one of the best defensive back courts in NCAA basketball. Right, literally, right? He's also great because he can shoot the three, even though his jump shot's a little janky. But what his strength is driving to the hole, penetrating, using his athleticism and his explosiveness, which is a great complement obviously this Kentucky team, because it helps collapse the zone where you can kick it back to open 3-point shooters. And with the great 3-point shooters you have, he's a great weapon at doing that, along with Amari Williams, who also drives and penetrates as well. So those are the two guys that really consistently try to go downhill towards the rim, collapse the zone to open up the 3-point shooting for the rest of the team. And so far, it's worked brilliantly. We will see how teams adjust moving forward, but he's a very good player. He's been the leading scorer, I think, consistently for Kentucky so far this year. Then, of course, you got Colin Chandler, the 6'4" shooting guard, coming out of his 2 years of Mormon, blah, blah, blah. I can't remember what you call it, but I live in Taiwan. We got tons of Mormons here as well. He did that. His Mormon, man, I don't know. Mormons go away for 2 years to try to recruit and do what religious people do. And he obviously did that for 2 years. And now after 2 years not playing in basketball, he's finally back. So you can see there's going to be a bit of an adjustment period for him. He's super athletic. He's a good shooter. So far, he hasn't shown that he's a great shooter, but a lot of that might be just the inconsistency of not playing very much over the last 2 years. He brings some tenacity and offensive ability as well as a bit of athleticism. You throw him in there with your other 3 guards, and right now you got knockdown shooting, great defense. He brings a little bit of both, right? And is a great complement to the other 3. Then we get to the 2 high school players, Travis Perry and Trent Noah. Both of them are great shooters. Trent Noah's done a little better so far, coming off the bench. He's been a little more deadly from the 3-point range, a little bit more physically strong on the interior. But obviously, these are the 2 guys that the coach has sort of put on the bench a lot more. And I understand a lot of this is just down to age and inexperience. Obviously, both of them look good. They're both great shooters. Travis Perry was obviously the number 1 high school player coming out of high school this year in Kentucky. He's a great shooter, a lot of experience, right? And he's going to be a great complement to the rest of the team moving forward, because now you have your 5th guard, who's also a great shooter. Once he understands his defensive schemes a little more, understands even if he's not the most athletic guard, he understands how to work within the team structure, right? Trent Noah obviously is going to add a little bit of forward depth. Physically, he's a pretty strong kid. He's also a great shooter, but he's going to have to consistently become a little more comfortable. So he can drive, he can go into the paint, he can rebound. Obviously, he's not the tallest guy, but a team like this Kentucky definitely needs as much help on the boards as they can get. And a guy like him, who's pretty strong, 6'6" guy, they need him to be physical and to bring that into the games. It'll be interesting to see how these 2 players develop as the season progresses. I do expect by the end of the year they're going to be a lot more important to the team. And at that point, it would not be a shock or surprise going into March to see Kentucky using a 12-man roster. And that depth and that bench is definitely going to be a great thing, because they don't have the biggest players, so they could potentially pick up a lot of early fouls. So you're going to need to make sure you rotate a lot to protect guys and not get into too much foul trouble, and potentially play some smaller lineups as well. Then, of course, the last addition, the BYU alum who followed Coach Pope from BYU, is Jackson Robinson. Jackson Robinson is a great shooter. But then again, I can understand why he came off the bench at BYU. His handle is not that good. He struggles to penetrate off the dribble. He struggles to open up his jump shot off the dribble, right? Defensively, he's not bad. He's pretty long and athletic, so he's able to defensively do pretty well. I think that's why they are starting him. Plus, he is just a great shooter. If you give him an open look, 9 times out of 10, he's going to bury that shot. But the problem is, when you're playing tougher defenses like we saw against Duke, with real high level players, right? Guys that are just as tall, just as athletic as you, and understand you're a knockdown shooter, so they won't give you those open shots. Now you got to find ways to contribute, which is pump fakes, head fakes, get off the dribble, get guys moving, pull up, get to your spot on the floor off the pull up jump shot, right? He didn't show that ability yet. And as a veteran player like him, that's something he definitely needs to improve on. He's got to be able to get guys defensively on their back foot, penetrate, get them moving, and then pull up for comfortable jump shots, which are going to open up his 3-point shots and potentially open up opportunities for him to drive to the lane. And he needs to finish stronger. His handle definitely needs to be better. But as far as an addition to the team we've already talked about, great addition. He's a starting small forward for this team. Great shooter. He's been either the leading scorer or the second leading scorer behind the shooting guard, Awawe. Sorry if I butchered his name. Those two guys obviously have been carrying the offense for Kentucky so far this year. We don't expect them to get a lot of inside scoring. So a lot of their scoring is going to be coming from the perimeter, right? So when you play a lot of other teams that understand that, what they're going to do is they're going to close off the 3-point shot, forcing guys to dribble and go to the hole, trying to collapse the zone so you can kick the ball out to open 3-point shooters, right? And at this point, these are some areas Jackson Robinson definitely needs to improve on, potentially posting up smaller guards on the inside, going off the dribble, finishing strong, right? Obviously, if you're at his position where potentially you may get drafted into the NBA, his shooting is fantastic. He's a great potential 3 and D player. But the problem is defensively you need to be better, stronger, physically, or more physical, and you got to be able to penetrate and finish strong, right? You don't have to be the best player in these areas, but you definitely got to be better than you have been so far, because against Duke, he got run off the court. Defensively, he was still solid, but offensively, he did nothing. And in the first half, it really hurt the team because they were struggling to find offense. Obviously, in the second half, the team did better all around. They moved the ball better. They got a lot more jump shots dropping, considering, they finally figured out how to slow things down a bit. In the first half, Duke really had them rushing and playing a little out of their pace. Even though they want to run fast, just the fact playing fast is one thing, but you don't want to play at a pace where, you're just playing too fast, right? Silly turnovers, not getting your feet set on jump shots, not making that extra pass. These were things they didn't do in the first half against Duke, but obviously improved in the second half moving forward. So what do you think about this roster? Will the Cats be better than Arkansas? I already said at the beginning of the video, I feel that this Kentucky team is definitely a better team than Arkansas, is going to do better this year in the SEC. They may not beat Arkansas in head-to-head matchups, even though I think they potentially will, but I definitely think they're going to be the better team throughout the season. The veteran experience they have, the great shooting throughout the roster, the depth are going to be very good strong points for this Kentucky team. The negative, of course, is the lack of size and depth, right? 3 big men. I'm sorry, the other guy I don't have here. What's his name? I can't even remember. He's playing power forward, but he's more of a guard. But because he's an older guy who's physically a little thicker, they've been using him as the 4th forward. And because he's a great shooter as well, and physically he's got a little bit of strength to him, he's been able to do well. But when you put him in with more athletic, longer forwards in the SEC, he's definitely going to struggle. But overall, this Kentucky team looks great. I'm super excited about it. I can't wait to see how this year unfolds. The victory against Duke, great, amazing. But the fact that they could not stop Cooper Flagg at all shows you there is definitely some areas they need to do better at, right? Cooper Flagg's a very good player, a very strong offensive player. but he is no superstar offensive player at this point. His strengths are defense and rebounding, and his athleticism, his ability to get up and down the court and finish. And obviously, he can finish on the outside and the inside. He can finish in set pieces and through transition. But he was easily able to take the Kentucky fours off the dribble, get to where he wanted to get his shots off. He was easily able to drive and get into the paint. And these are things that they're going to have to do better if they want to compete moving forward. But let me know what you think of this Kentucky team. Do you think they have much of a chance this year in the NCAA tournament? I mean, I'm excited right now. I've been looking at YouTube videos of their up-and-coming players like Jasper Johnson, who, obviously is a 6'4" guard, highly rated high school recruit who's already said he's coming to Kentucky. This is a great addition. Obviously we're going to lose a lot of players next year because the team is full of a lot of veteran players. You pull him, guys like Caleb Wilson and Moreno and others, it'll be interesting to see what this team looks like. But at the same time, you don't want to fall back into that Coach Calipari scenario where you're getting so many great high school players, but yet there's no chemistry, no cohesion, no experience in the roster, and not a lot of great shooting. I mean, last year, the best thing Kentucky had was a veteran, experienced player who was a knockdown shooter. Without him, they would have been very mid, right? And so, you got to make sure that you consistently still are pulling in great players that fit the roster and give you that experience, the shooting, and just the intangibles you need. But let me know what you think. Thanks for watching. Remember to like, subscribe, and share. I'll be doing far more basketball content as the seasons progress, both NBA and NCAA, and even a little WNBA. Obviously, Caitlin Clark is definitely having an impact. But let me know what you think. Thanks for watching. Peace out.